Hello, I'm Josh, and I am one of the board members at HMI, and my husband Michael is who's filming, and we're going to do a two-part series. The first part is going to be mashed potatoes, but I bake them, so I'll show you how I do that, and then the second part will be Michael's going to cook steaks and show you how the mashed potatoes finish. Okay, so first thing I'm doing is just showing you a little bit of what's going on in the kitchen. So the first thing is potatoes are boiling. So if you get a pot, fill it with water, depending on how many potatoes or how big you want to make it. We're doing actually service for more than two because we want to keep these as leftovers and use them throughout the week. Chop up your potatoes, get that water boiling, add a little bit of salt, and throw those bad boys in. And so the potatoes will cook for, 20 to 25 minutes. That's the first thing we got going. The second thing we got going is some onions and garlic, and I'm actually going to show you how we do that. And so over here I've got two types of greens. They're fairly inexpensive in the grocery store, which I like because it means I can buy more. And this is a scallion, and this is something called green garlic. And I like the green garlic because it has a little oniony flavor, a little garlicky flavor, and when you start to saute it, it really has a nice flavor. I've got a little bit going with some oil, so just kind of heat up the oil in the pan. I'm going to show you how we chop these up, and I've got two ways of doing it. I don't always like a big knife, so sometimes I use a scissor. And believe it or not, when I was in school and a lot younger, I used to use just regular scissors. These are shears with my knife set, but you can use any scissors, just wash them before you use them. But I cut because it's just a little easier than sometimes using a knife. For this dish, I can sometimes use a little bit more raw or a little bit more sauteed. So this is actually, I wanted to show you sort of how this looks, but I'm going to let that saute a little bit, and it'll be a little bit less done than some of the other greens. But you can see it's just quite easy to use a scissor. Just do sort of small pieces, but big enough that you don't have to worry about mincing or making it too small. And this green garlic will just sort of match right in with all of the other things that are going on. The stem here, I just put right in the sink and either in a disposal or a garbage can, and you're totally fine. I'm gonna put a little bit of that end in, but I'm actually gonna save the rest of this for the mushrooms we're going to use with the steak. So this is going away. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is just mix that up. Just mix that in here. Let that start to soak in with the rest of those flavors and cook down a bit. So that's going to get going. Just going to cover that. Let that sort of marinate and do its thing. We've turned the boiling water off because we're going to get ready to put the potatoes in a colander and then start mashing them. And then sometimes that's the case for this week. I was able to get a couple of fresh herbs, real inexpensive, a big batch. Sometimes it's even less expensive than buying it dried. And so the two seasonings or two ingredients that I really like are parsley and thyme for this specific recipe, but really if you like something else like a basil, or you want to try something that you haven't experimented with, a little rosemary, you really can do whatever you're interested in trying, or your flavors really tell you want to eat. I like the parsley because it's a little fresh and it tastes sort of like spring. So I'm going to put that just a little bit here on the cutting board, use the knife to finish chopping it a little bit further, get it really minced so that it can really go throughout the potatoes. And that's going to be the herbs. I also chopped up a little bit in advance, a little bit of thyme. And this is what thyme looks like. It's just a little ingredient, kind of very Italian. Thyme, rosemary, basil, all sorts of things that we use with Italian cooking. All right, colander time. My least favorite part because the pot is hot and I am short. So not always the easiest thing to do, but I'm going to put the colander up, take my little mitts, and I'm going to carefully pour the water into the colander with the potatoes. Careful of that steam. It's quite hot. But just get all that water out first and then try and get those potatoes to sort of come out with it. And you can see they're starting to crumble a bit, which is a good sign. It means that the potatoes are done and they're cooked and they're ready to go. Just gonna move that pot over there for a minute. Shake out that excess water. You don't really need it. Some people wash them afterwards, believe it or not, just to get a little bit of that potato starch off. I don't, I kind of like it, so I leave it alone, but get that water out because you don't need it. It'll just make the potatoes a little watery. And then I actually dump the potatoes back in the pot because we're going to smash them. And the way that we're going to do that, which I'll show you in a second, is you do it two ways. You take 2 forks, sort of mash it around with 2 forks, or if you have a mashed potato masher, you can mash it with a potato masher. I'm going to use actually forks today because I'm going to add a bunch of stuff and I want to really get in there and make sure that I get it really well done. So the first thing I'll do, because I have these potatoes here and I like to keep clean, my friends know that I am very organized about this stuff. So I don't like to keep a mess in the kitchen. I've already got a lot going on already with this colander. So I'm going to put the colander, rinse it out so that all that potato gets out of it. If I need to use it for something else, I have it. And I'm also going to just sort of organize myself a bit over here with the knives and all the stuff so that I have a little more room to work. Put these over here for now, we don't need those. All right, step 1. I use about 1/3 of a stick of butter to get me started. So a little stick of butter, 1/3 of a stick, throw that bad boy in. Next thing I do is I take all those ingredients, like I said, I want to start to clean up a bit. I don't want to mess, so put all of those ingredients in. That's 1. 2 is this thyme, which I'll get to in 1 second. Put that over there so it's out of my way. That thyme goes in. And I don't cook them, it goes in right raw because we're going to actually bake these. I'm going to turn the oven on now to about 350. Bake, right? So on bake, 350. Start. Done. 350, oven on. Butter is in, starting to melt. Fresh herbs are in, starting to melt. I'm going to see how these onions are starting to, I say melt down. They start to get a little bit more soft. And the green actually, it's got a little bit of brown in it because I added a little bit of balsamic vinegar. What the balsamic vinegar will do is 2 things. 1 is it gives it a nice little acid flavor, very Italian-esque. And 2 is, see that the brown spots? It's actually a good thing, it's caramelizing. And so the balsamic vinegar is actually starting to caramelize those onions and give it that sweet flavor. So that's what's going on in here. I'm gonna just simply dump all of this stuff into that smashed potato. And I do this with the ingredients because it'll actually start to help to make the mashed potatoes really flavorful and start to give me a little bit of heads up on how much ingredients I've used. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this burner off. And since all my ingredients are over here, I'm just gonna shift this pot over this way, okay? Rub everything off on those potatoes, you get all those ingredients off. We don't wanna waste anything. All right, next, what I'm gonna do is twofold. Honey, can I have a spoon? Can I have a spoon? I have my masher in a second. I need a spoon for the sour cream, and I need 2 forks for the potatoes as well.
Big?
Yep, big forks are good. See, I have a helper for this. Okay. All right, here we go. So I have a little jar or container, I guess, of sour cream. This one's 8 ounces. You don't need a full 8 ounces. I typically start off with about half. So about half of this goes in. I happen to have about 2/3 left, so most of it's gonna go in. Put that in just on top.
Josh, what if you can't eat dairy?
Oh my gosh. Well, some people don't like sour cream, so some people use Greek yogurt. That's still dairy. But they do actually now make yogurts without dairy. So they do like a cashew yogurt or even a coconut yogurt. So if you're doing like a fish versus a steak and you want to do a little curry or a little coconut or something, you could do that. Good question, Michael.
And for the butter?
Curveball. You don't have to use butter, actually. I use butter because of the fat. So some people will use olive oil instead. And olive oil is a great substitute because it does carry a little bit of that fat, which is good. So you can do olive oil. So you don't have to do this with dairy. Good job, Michael, thinking about those non-dairy folks out there. I love that. All right, so I just like to get all the ingredients off. And sometimes what I do, because I'm just that kind of guy, is just do a little taste test. Really clean up that sour cream. Delish. Okay. The last thing I do is I do put cheese. Now this pack happens to just be Kraft cheese. It's 8 ounces. You can do whatever cheese makes you happy. Again, to Michael's point, if you do not have dairy, you do not have to use cheese. You can use soy cheese or another ingredient, or you just can leave it completely out. I just put about half of it in. Okay, leave a little bit left in the bag for the top of them. And lastly is some seasoning. Back up, babe. Get out of my way. All right, so I use 3 things. I use a little bit of salt, I use a little bit of black pepper, and I use Italian seasoning, which complements the parsley and the thyme. The 4th ingredient is turmeric, which I think is a spice that comes from the Southeast Asia, sort of India region of the world. I like it because it gives it a little bit of yellow color. It's also really good for anti-inflammation, so I use it because it's supposed to be super healthy. So I put a fair amount in. Doesn't have a lot of flavor, which is good because you won't taste a lot of it, but super good in terms of that. And then I put about a tablespoon, a teaspoon, depending on what your flavor profile is, of the Italian seasoning, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of salt. And again, this is one of those recipes where it's all about you. If you don't have these ingredients, use what you got. Don't be afraid to experiment, try something new, just do what makes you feel good, and have fun with it. All right, so now all those ingredients are in. So like I said, you can use a potato smasher or forks. I'll show you how both work. The potato masher is pretty simple. You just start to push down the potatoes, start to mix them. I left the skin on the potatoes because I think it adds a little bit more texture. Like I said, I don't love to waste, so if there's something I can wash or clean and use, we'll go ahead and use it. And the skin actually is super packed with vitamins and good stuff, so I tend to keep the skin on, wash it really well so that it's all clean, and you can see where all those ingredients are starting to mash together. So now what I'll do is I'll show you with a fork. Right? If you don't have a masher or you don't want to use a masher, this is why I don't always use a masher, because look at this. All this stuff gets in it. But that's okay. We'll just clean it up real quick. Clean it up, clean it up, clean it up. Sometimes when anyone's not looking, I just tend to eat off of this little masher and clean it up because I like to taste it. All right, that's pretty good for now. I'm gonna leave that in here. I'll clean that later. With forks, all you do is you take it and you smash it together. So you just take both forks and you just start smashing it together. And that sort of sifts it through the fork, starts to make that mash. And then you can also start to mix. So it's a little easier with the forks to really mix all those ingredients in. And like I said, that 1/3 of a stick of butter, that little bit of sour cream, you can see the cheese is starting to stick. It's just starting to make it a little bit more creamy and rich. Thank you, Michael. And this time, depending on how many potatoes or maybe how they absorb the ingredients, I may add a bit more of either butter or sour cream, or in this case, olive oil. I'm actually gonna add a little bit of olive oil to just keep it sort of rich and gooey potatoes. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of olive oil. Again, you can add whatever you want, butter, olive oil, sour cream. This will just keep it creamy.
Any salt?
Nope, I already did the salt. Salt. I'm gonna put some salt on top too. Okay. All right, now it's all mixed. Again, depends on how you like it. Some people like it super creamy. Michael and I like it a little bit more with some lumps in it. Just gives it a nice bite. And actually, I'm gonna pour the rest of that sour cream in. We'll be done with this. Just a little bit left in this container, so I'm gonna go ahead and use it. Okay. Mix that in. Okay, now the fun part. I like to bake them. I like to bake them because I like to put the cheese on top, the balance of that cheese, just a little bit to give it some extra flavor. I put a little salt on top to really give it that kind of French fry, potato-y, salty flavor, and a little bit more black pepper. But what the baking is going to do is really allow these ingredients to all set in, really stick to the potatoes, really bring it out. And the way I explain to people is it's sort of like eating pizza the second day. Or eating some kind of Italian or Mexican the second day. It really adds some flavor to it. So, all right. So what we're gonna do is, I have a dish. This is the shape. I don't know what they're called, but we'll call it a casserole dish. I just rinsed it out with some water just to keep it clean. And then I just either put a little bit of, you can do anything, a little butter. I have a little bit of oil spray, just whatever really you want, just to keep that, you know, sort of coated. A little bit of oil in the bottom is fine. I used to take a little oil, put it in the bottom, spread it around with a little paper towel or something, just to keep the bottom a little bit less sticky. And now I'm gonna just put all those potatoes in. Wow, this is super heavy. Huh. Again, I'm making a lot, because Michael and I will typically sort of cook a lot more than we need and then keep leftovers. Just helps for the next day, lunch, snack, whatever. So that's what I'm putting in here. Just gonna put that back down for a minute. Scrape the bottom. I hate wasting, which we know. And then all you're gonna do is just with the back of your spoon or a fork, just gonna spread them out. Just sort of put them in the dish, spread them out, right? And you don't need to make it perfect. It doesn't need to be smooth or anything. Just shove it all in. Make sure there's nothing left in that pot. All right, and then the last step before we put it in the oven is I typically put that here for a minute.
No horseradish.
Take a little bit of cheese. Put that on top. Just sort of spread it kind of lightly. Michael's gonna hate me for this, but I'm about to use the rest of it and just be done. He's rolling his eyes. You can't see that, but I'm just telling you, he's doing his thing. And then that'll go in the recycling. Okay, last step is I put this again, 350 bake oven. I cover it with tin foil and I bake it for about 20 minutes in total. But about 12 to 15 minutes in, I take the foil off. And what that does is it opens up the balance of the potatoes to the heat and really lets that cheese melt in and get a little bit more browned. So what I'm gonna do now is simply just grab that tin foil, put it on top. Kind of just sort of coat or curve rather the top around the lid. And like I said, between 20, 22 minutes is fine. Just really want to heat it up and get all those flavors mixed together. And for part 2, we'll finish our dinner and take out those potatoes and show you what it looks like. Thanks.